In this video we'll tackle the newest published 5th edition adventure, The Wild Beyond the Witchlight, as we'll take a closer look at the introductory chapter to the adventure. So if you're getting ready to run The Wild Beyond the Witchlight, you do not want to miss this video, as we'll be going over everything the DM needs to know before they take their players into the Feywild. Hi, my name is J.A. Valeur with the Adamantine best-selling publisher Eventyr Games, and in this video I want to tackle the new Wizards of the Coast adventure, The Wild Beyond the Witchlight. This will be the first video in a long series covering The Wild Beyond the Witchlight, and in this video I'll focus on the introductory chapter to the adventure. That means I'll go over the summary of the adventure. I'll also be looking at the various player options that are made available to characters, and I'll also go into the 2 hooks that the adventure provides for getting the characters hooked into the adventure. I'll also discuss what you may want to cover in a session 0 before you start the campaign. This video and this video series is a companion to the DM's resources that we are publishing on the DM's Guild, and which you can find somewhere in a link below. The adventure takes place mostly in the Feywild, specifically in a domain called Prismere, which has been divided into 3 different realms, each governed by a hag. The adventure starts as the characters arrive at the Witchlight Carnival, which is a carnival that travels between the Feywild and the material plane and various other planes. In contrast to recent published 5th edition adventures, The Wild Beyond the Witchlight is fairly linear in its structure, and it also has a complete and easy to follow structure. Basically, the characters start out at the Witchlight Carnival, then they can travel to the Feywild, specifically the realm of Hither, which is within Prismere. They can then go from Hither to Tither, and from Tither to Yarn, and from there to Palace of Heart's Desire, which is where they can free this Archfey from her imprisonment. Each of these realms are structured as sandboxes, so there are some elements of freedom, but the story itself is fairly linear. By having a linear structure but still having some elements of sandbox that are contained within their own realms, the DM can plan and prepare for these smaller sandboxes instead of having to prepare everything at once. This makes the DM's job a lot easier while still keeping the adventure quite fun for the players, because they have some elements of freedom just within small pockets of this domain that they're in. The campaign book also provides us with some new player options that are listed in the introductory chapter to the adventure. First off, there's 2 backgrounds. There's the Fey Lost and the Witchlight Hand. The Fey Lost background basically has the character having already been in the Feywild and then come back to the material plane, and then they are returning to the Feywild in the adventure, of course. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of this background, or at least the way it's set up, because it becomes quite convoluted when you have the characters starting in the material plane, then they have been to the Feywild, then they come back, and then they're going back again. I think it makes more sense to use this background for a Fey character that was originally in the Feywild, then traveled to the material plane either by design or by accident. Perhaps they came through with the carnival, and then they want to go back to the Feywild, where they will of course also be asked to solve the adventure's main quest, which is freeing this Archfey. If you want to use it for a character that's native to the material plane, you can also decide to simply shorten the amount of time the character has been in the Feywild, so they don't know as much about the Feywild and isn't as connected to the Feywild as the background would otherwise imply. This could be if the character wandered into the Witchlight Carnival, got lost in the Feywild for what felt like just a day or 2, but perhaps several weeks, months, or even years passed in the material plane. If you want a reason for why the character wants to go back to the Feywild, it could be because they have lost something there, as it's also something that is set up in the Lost Things hook, which we'll get into later in this video. Next up, there's the Witchlight Hand, and this background has the character being a helper at the carnival from the get-go. It also describes how the character would know some or all of the NPCs at the carnival, as well as some of the carousels, the events, and the locations within the carnival. And this, I think, poses some issues, because it's often not very fun for a character to know more than the player. In this event, the DM would have to keep informing the player about what their character knows. Of course, if you have a player that is very good at improvising and can come up with fun situations, or can read the room and see how their character would have interacted with this NPC or event or location, they may be able to pick up the thread and it'll be natural. But for most players, being told what you know and then having to act off of that can be quite difficult, and it also puts more work on the DM, because you have to have a deep knowledge of the carnival and every little thing, because the player would of course also have that knowledge. So all in all, if I were to use the background in my game, I would probably make it so that the character hasn't been a Witchlight Hand for that long. Perhaps they've only been there a few days, so while they may know the general layout, they don't know every little location, carousel or event. This can also mesh well with the Lost Things hook, because the character may have joined up with the carnival just a few days ago to find this thing that they're looking for. Next up, the book also provides us with 2 new player race options. The fairy is reasonably simple. It gets only 2 features, but these features are quite powerful. It gets fairy magic, which allows it to cast some useful spells such as Druidcraft, Entangle and Fairy Fire, but most notably it also gets flying. The fairy gets a fly speed that is equal to its normal move speed as long as it's not wearing medium or heavy armor. Having a character that can fly can create a lot of problems, especially in an open outdoors campaign such as the Wild Beyond the Witchlight. So before you allow a character to have a flying character or be a flying character, you may want to consider whether or not you're okay with them being able to fly above the battlefield, rendering melee attackers completely useless. Likewise, it can also be an issue if the character is able to easily circumvent or avoid obstacles or dangers that is a part of the adventure and would be more fun if they actually had to walk into with the rest of the party. The Herringon gets several useful features, such as being able to add the proficiency to initiative. They can hop away from danger without provoking opportunity attacks, and they can also get some bonuses to the dexterity saving throws. I don't think there's any particular class or character concept that wouldn't benefit from having the Herringon's traits. So all in all, the Herringon is a very strong but also not game-breaking character option that I would allow in my game. Next up, we have Beginning the Adventure, where the book provides us with 2 concrete hooks, and these are Lost Things and the Warlock's Quest. First off, I think it's nice that we actually get some useful and applicable hooks for the adventure. In previous adventures like Rime of the Frostmaiden or Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus, the hooks we got there weren't really very strong, and there wasn't a strong reason for the characters to actually go on the adventure. The 2 hooks provided here provide at least some measure of reason for why the characters would go to the Feywild, and in the case of the Warlock's Quest, it also provides a direct reason for the characters to follow through on the adventure till the very end. As for the Lost Things hook, I think that there are some benefits to it. The things the characters can have lost can be quite fun to roleplay, and there's also some benefits to regaining what they have lost. It also has the benefit of not spoiling the main adventure if you want to keep that a bit under wraps and be something that characters figure out along the way, as the characters won't necessarily know that there's an archfey imprisoned somewhere in the realm of Prismere. If there's one thing I dislike about the Lost Things hook, it is that the characters can't regain inspiration before they have recovered what they've lost. This can of course be okay if all the characters have lost something, but if just some of the characters have lost something, or some of the characters find what they've lost quite early, it may feel a bit bad for the other characters to not be able to gain inspiration while other party members can freely gain inspiration. I don't think it's necessary to punish the characters further. I think that the loss of whatever it is, their ability to smile or their sense of direction, is enough. You don't need to tag on the inability to gain inspiration onto that. There are some very fun things the characters can have lost already described in the book, as well as items that are attached to these things. And we've also provided 6 additional things the characters can have lost and additional magic items in our DM's resources for the Wild Beyond the Witchlight. Then there's a Warlock's Quest, which is a more simple, straightforward quest where a Warlock asks the characters to go into the Feywild to find out what has happened to his patron, the Archfey Sibylna. This hook has some advantages, mainly that it sets the characters on the main quest directly, so they know what the adventure is about and what they need to do. It also enables the DM to give the players some information about the plot of the story, but also the various features of the Feywild, Prismere, and the Witchlight Carnival, which may be helpful especially for newer players. The disadvantage here is of course that the more information we give, the less we can keep back and dole out when it's fun to do so. So if you think your players would have more fun discovering the plot as they go, or you just think it is more fun if they do it that way, then you may want to reduce the information the Warlock has. There's also a case to be made for combining the hooks. It's quite easy to combine the 2 hooks so that some characters have lost something, and that's why they're going to the Witchlight Carnival, while other player characters have been sent there by the Warlock to help him figure out what has happened to the Archfey Sibylna. In this case, I would of course allow the characters who have lost something to gain inspiration so they don't feel cheated compared to the characters who have been sent by the Warlock. It's always a good idea to have a session 0 before you begin any campaign. A session 0 is where you can let the players know about the general code of conduct, the expectations you have of them and they should have of you, how you prefer to run your games in terms of hidden roles or NPC behavior, player behavior. Do you allow for murder hobos and so on? All these things are good to have sorted out beforehand so the players and the DM come into the game with the same expectations. But Session 0 is also where you can give the players more information about the campaign they're about to play, so they can create characters that mesh well with the adventure and with each other. So for Wild Beyond the Witchlight specifically, there's a few things that I think it's important for the DM to emphasize at a Session 0. This could be that it's a Feywild campaign, so will take place mostly in the Feywild and mostly in the outdoors, in nature. It's also probably a good idea to mention that the campaign runs from 1st to 7th or 8th level, so the players don't go out and create characters that aren't fun until the higher levels. You may also want to mention that the adventure draws inspiration from Alice in Wonderland and Brothers Grimm adventures, so it has this darkly whimsical theme, which is something the players may want to know beforehand and when they create characters. The Wild Beyond the Witchlight also specifically mentions that encounters can be avoided or even completed without resorting to combat. This is something a player may want to know, so they can create a character that is fun to play even when the party decides to go about an encounter in a way that doesn't involve combat. Alright, so that wraps it up for this video. I hope that you liked it. If you did, you can like and subscribe and comment down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on running the Wild Beyond the Witchlight. In the next video, we'll probably take a look at the Witchlight Carnival and the first chapter of the book, and then there'll also be a review for the Wild Beyond the Witchlight out sometime, hopefully this week. We've also just put out the complete DM's bundle for the Wild Beyond the Witchlight, and while it isn't complete yet, it will be updated with each chapter as we covered in our DM's resources. So if you want to save some money on picking up the DM's resources for the Wild Beyond the Witchlight, you can do so by clicking the link somewhere below. Beyond that, there's not a whole lot left to say except that I'm happy that you're following along, and I hope that I'll see you in the next video.